The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
And you're gonna love it.
Okay, let's go.
All right, so we were supposed to be doing this interview with you either in Gaza or in Jerusalem, but
That's right.
You're in Chicago. So I guess let's start off with that part of the story. All right, listen, everybody. I've got a treat. Well, it's a treat for me, for sure. And I know it's going to be a treat for everybody, but Dr. Thair Ahmad, and that is the English pronunciation. So I want you to give me your real deal Palestinian name. But Dr. Thair Ahmad is somebody I got hooked up with via Dr. Mimi, whom I've had on before. And it's a pleasure to have you. And like I said, we had planned on doing this with you being in either Gaza or Jerusalem a few weeks ago. But what happened?
Right. Yeah, I appreciate you having me. Yeah, and the way you'd say my name in Palestinian is Thair Ahmad.
Thair Ahmad. All right.
Yeah. And anybody who was born during the first Intifada got names like Thair, which means revolutionary, or Nidal or Basil, all these different names that are related to basically trying to preserve Palestinian identity. But it's unfortunate and it's sad to say that we're here doing this podcast. I'm here in Chicago. We were supposed to enter as a part of the World Health Organization's emergency medical teams into Gaza on June 19th. Now, the only way that happens now is a healthcare worker from anywhere in the world has to fly to Jordan and Amman. And once you get there, you get all the preliminary approvals, you submit all of your documents. All of this happens weeks before. But the final approval comes from the Israelis. It's a division within the Israeli military called Koga. And they notify you about 8 hours before the convoy is supposed to depart from Jordan to the West Bank, to Jerusalem, to Gaza. And I was notified the night before that I did not get the permissions that I needed. I did not get the approval. And it's very bizarre because you get a WhatsApp message from the WHO telling you sorry, and your name is highlighted in red. And you see everybody that got approved, their name is highlighted in green. And then they're off and you're not able to join them. And, what really sucks about that is we spend weeks coordinating with our colleagues on the ground in Gaza. The WHO plans on where you're going to be deployed, where you're going to be working. I bring in different supplies that I think I'll need. In fact, this time around, because of the massive baby formula shortage, infant formula, I had packed within my scrubs some infant formula, and all of that stayed outside of Gaza with me, and all of that wasn't able to enter. And I'm not the only one. I mean, I think part of why I got rejected is because of my Palestinian background. Also, somebody who tries to at least elevate the awareness about what's happening on the ground in Gaza. You also put yourself under a microscope. But we're seeing 40 to 50% of people who are trying to enter Gaza this way are getting rejected in the same fashion.
And you're talking about medical doctors. So let me just understand this process, because this is insane to me that this is being done through WhatsApp. Like, that's what I have funny joke groups with my relatives overseas on. So you're telling me the World Health Organization, which obviously is one of the largest humanitarian organizations in the world, you and other doctors, you have to apply through them in order to be allowed to enter Gaza. And then they're the ones, I'm assuming they're having to then coordinate with the Israeli government or that Israeli organization you mentioned. And so all of this is happening is it an individual WhatsApp, or is it like part of a gigantic group WhatsApp?
Yeah, it's exactly right. It's a bigger WhatsApp group. And this is a coalition of every international organization that's trying to work in Gaza. Like the organization that was helping me get into Gaza and I was going to work with was called GLIA, but they're all under the umbrella of the World Health Organization. So everybody is working with the World Health Organization to get in. You're submitting all of your documents to them. And the WHO is the intermediary between your approval and the Israeli military, who has the final say on this. And so it's a huge operation. And it's something, again, there are all these different submissions that are required, documents. You're supposed to send in your CV. You're supposed to send in your background, all the certifications you have, and all of this, when it comes to the final decision, is communicated in such a rink-a-dink way. Like the fact that you're getting this message from an unknown person, you don't know what the reason of rejection is. It's just your name in red. it's a miserable process, and I've been through it more than once, and it's really, really disgusting.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like this right now is the number one, number two, and number three thing in the news. And it's been that way for the past 20 months, or if not all three, it's in the top three. And this process of getting medical workers into Gaza to help innocent civilians is so rinky-dink. Like, this is ridiculous. This is like organizing a neighborhood birthday party, probably even worse. That's insane to me. I'm wondering if, I have to imagine they look at your social media, they look at everything, and probably in your case, and by the way, I look at your social media because I follow you, it's all fact based. You're not unhinged on your social media. As a matter of fact, I just saw an image you posted a few days ago of 4 babies on the same incubator. And in my mind, I showed a couple friends and I said, take a look at this. And my friend's wife just literally, I mean, she practically started crying, and she's like, I don't understand how those babies are even alive still. And many of them aren't, like, that's insane. Okay, let's go back to 2008, because you've been going to Gaza really since 2008.
That's right. Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
2008, 2009 was Operation Cast Lead, which was the first Israeli military operation in Gaza since 2006.
Okay, so a lot of people think what's taking place in Gaza right now started October 7th, 2023. It didn't. I know that. But why don't you help us understand what were things like in 2008 with Operation Cast Lead and all that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's such an important point to understand that Gaza has been under a miserable siege and blockade since 2006. And the conditions on the ground are quite miserable. I mean, I think right now, you look at it and you say, wow, before October 2023, things were actually pretty good. That's what my friends in Gaza say. But if you really look at what's happening on the ground, it's really tough. I mean, you're talking about more than 50% of the population is under the global poverty line. And you're talking about people who are going to grow up in this small strip of land. It's less than the length of a marathon. Gaza is less than the length of a marathon. At its widest, it's 7 miles wide. And people are stuck and trapped in this. It's impossible to get in. It's impossible to get out. It was very tough to get in. I mean, you're talking about a siege from all corners. And there is total control of the borders, of the sea, of the electromagnetic atmosphere above. I mean, this is you're talking about a place where it is a place where people will be born, never leave, and die there. And we've been working there since 2009, because after Operation Cast Lead, it was clear that it's not going to be easy to evacuate somebody medically out of Gaza. Before October 7th, 2023, it's not going to be easy. But let's try to build up the local healthcare worker capacity. We have brilliant physicians in Gaza. All they're asking for is support in their professional growth and their ability to treat the local communities. And I want to point something out that I think is very important for people to understand, just because this is really gives you a glimpse of what life was like before October 2023. When we were trying to bring in medical equipment for these hospitals so these doctors could treat their patients, we were getting rejected the majority of the time. I mean, this is going through the Israelis. This is us applying through the Israelis, giving them what the parts look like, giving them their manufacturer numbers, telling them we want to bring it into this hospital at this time. And if it was something that was going to be delivering oxygen to somebody, 70% of the time it was getting rejected. We're talking about spare parts for CT machines so that they can continue to run, so people can get diagnosed with cancer. They can find out if their headache is because of a tumor, or an ultrasound machine that can help a pregnant lady understand, is her baby progressing normally? Is she going to be delivering on time? All of these things were getting rejected more than 50% of the time. And then on the flip side, when we would have kids with cancer who we were going to be evacuating out of Gaza, a third of the time they were getting rejected. And these kids also need to have companions that accompany them. We're not going to let a kid who's 9 years old with some pediatric cancer just leave Gaza alone. They need a mom or a dad or a grandparent. Those people were getting rejected 67% of the time. So we're talking about miserable conditions in terms of just preserving life in Gaza before October 7th. And this was the case. And we saw in 2009, there was a military operation by the Israelis, 2012, 2014. 2021. I mean, we were seeing the aftermath of the Israeli military just decimate parts of Gaza. Of course, nothing has been on the scale of what's happened since October 7th. But before then, it was not like, oh, there was a place that was living and prospering and everybody was doing fine. We were
Right.
talking about a blockade on life in Gaza.
Yeah. And this goes all the way back to 2006. Honestly, I'll be very honest. I knew nothing about Gaza until maybe October 8th, 2023. I really didn't even know anything about it. And then when that attack happened, that's when I was like, oh wow, yeah, that doesn't seem good. Why did they do that? And then from there, obviously my education process has taken place where I've really tried to understand, what is going on in this region. Prior to this, I think my only experience with it was the TV show Fauda on Netflix. And I will tell you, I've gone back and watched that show now, and I can barely get through it because I know the truth versus what they've displayed on there. But try to connect the dots with a lot of this stuff. And so one of the things I always hear the Israeli side talking about is how in 2005, we left Gaza. We took all the Israeli settlers out of Gaza and we gave them Gaza. And then when I was like, okay, well, what does that mean? When I researched it, that all that means is in 2005, they removed 8,500 settlers out of a population of, I believe, 2.5 million. So you had 2.4999 million Palestinians now. And then with the Israelis out of Gaza, that's when the siege started. That's when this concept of really turning it into an open air prison, based on my research, that's when that started. So then I'm like, oh my God. So that's what they did. They took their people out and then they turned it into this open air prison. Did I connect those dots properly?
That's exactly right. I mean, at the time, the prime minister was Ariel Sharon, who was a part of the Likud party that Netanyahu is a part of. And this is a very right wing party that wants to take
Yeah.
a hardline stance. And so the decision was not made in an effort to bring peace. The decision was made to remove the 8,000 Israeli settlers, and the population was just under 2 million at the time. But they removed 8,000 settlers, and then they imposed the siege that you're talking about. And this was already there was concerns about the actions of Ariel Sharon. He basically precipitated the second intifada in 2000 actually, when he visited Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. So already the way Likud views the idea of a peace process is one that includes a tremendous amount of violence. I mean, so somebody making a decision like this is not doing it in the best interest of Palestinians and the idea that a future Palestinian state can be accomplished. There's something more nefarious at play here. And if you look at how the blockade was imposed immediately on Palestinians, we're talking about Israeli ministers saying things like, we're going to be putting the people of Gaza on a strict diet. At one point early in this siege, Ray, just to show you the ludicrous nature of this, that there was no effort towards peace, they were blocking potato chips from entering into Gaza. That was on a prohibited item list. And this is how detailed, nuanced, and intentional the blockade of Gaza was. And it was really hard to get in. I mean, it was a miserable process to get in from back then. This is this idea that, Gaza could have been this paradise and, the Palestinians chose this path that they're on now. And we're talking about Ariel Sharon here. We're talking
Yeah.
about one of the most violent leaders in Israeli history. This is a guy that chooses violence always.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think people realize, we think Netanyahu's bad. I don't think people realize how bad Ariel Sharon was. And then, just random question. Do you know much about like when Yitzhak Rabin was in power for Israel and then Yasser Arafat was running, I believe, the PLO, and then they wanted to actually make a peace deal? It seemed, based on, again, I haven't deep dived into this, but based on my initial research, it seemed like those two guys actually were like, okay, you know what? Let's figure this out and let's put the past behind us and let's try and make this work. And then all of a sudden, Yitzhak Rabin gets assassinated by, I believe, a right-wing Likud member. Is that
He was
correct?
a right wing extremist that was the Likud party praised him because he's out of jail now. I mean, this
The
person that
guy that
assassinated
killed
Prime
Yitzhak Rabin, you're
the
saying.
guy that
Okay.
killed Yitzhak Rabin was praised by Likud party members. Rabin was viewed as a traitor within the right-wing world of Israel for even making a peace deal. To give you some context about that, because it is very fascinating. On the heels of as the first intifada was raging on, it became clear to the Israelis that the status quo that existed currently was not going to be sustainable. And what it was the Israeli military was the administrator in the West Bank and in Gaza. I mean, all of the people who were born at this time who were working in the West Bank, it was the Israeli military that was governing them. And they felt as the Intifada was going on, which is translated to uprising, is when the
Yeah.
Palestinians were saying we want self-determination, that they realized it wasn't sustainable. And there was a grassroots movement within the West Bank and Gaza of Palestinian leadership from different groups that was ready to kind of enter into some sort of agreement. But instead, the PLO was largely exiled from the West Bank and Gaza. In fact, at the time, Yasser Arafat was in Tunisia. And so what the Israelis did is they played this delegation from within the West Bank and Gaza, and they were playing the PLO led by Yasser Arafat and seeing who would give them the best sort of agreement and deal, who would play ball with them. And so that was kind of how Oslo Accords came about. They were able to kind of get this deal in place where there would be this Palestinian apparatus that would coordinate with the Israelis, but would also be able to, give land deeds in the West Bank or Gaza, give ID cards. The idea was to eventually have this sort of demilitarized state. And that was so unpopular. Despite that agreement, the Oslo Accords essentially hiring Palestinians to help with the security of Israel. It was so unpopular that Rabin was assassinated before it could get to various stages. I mean, there's still parts of the Oslo Accords that are being implemented in the West Bank. That's why you hear terms like Area A, Area B, Area C.
Yeah.
That's all
Yeah.
from the Oslo Accords. And that's why the Palestinian Authority currently it gets its money from the Israelis. So any aid that comes in through other countries, including the United States, that money first goes to the Israelis. They obviously have to take a fee for accepting the money, and then they hand it over to the Palestinians. And there's over 2 billion shekels right now that is being held hostage by the Israelis from the Palestinian Authority by Smotrich, the finance minister, in a way to basically cripple the Palestinian Authority, not allow them to pay their employees. But the Palestinian Authority also has to do security coordination with the Israelis. So they need to be the ones policing Palestinian areas, sharing intelligence with the Israelis. And so that deal, which basically helps the Israelis with their security, was so unpopular because it recognized kind of like that there were Palestinians that existed and that they needed to have their own institutions, that Rabin was killed for it. I mean, he was gunned down and killed for it.
Yeah, he was literally killed for it. Did Palestinians like Yasser Arafat? Was he loved?
Yasser Arafat is a character that is I would say, respected and liked prior to the Oslo Accords. He's somebody who, he was, leading, obviously, has been in many places. He was in Egypt for a little bit. He had to go to Lebanon. He got kicked out of Lebanon, was in Tunisia. So he was a very charismatic leader, but he was also respected by different factions. I think the Oslo Accords and the corruption that ensued afterwards, with many members of like the PLO becoming individually rich as a result of this, I think that soured the taste in a lot of people's mouths, especially their attitudes towards Yasser Arafat. But you'll find he's still a popular figure. I mean, he's still history. A lot of people really look fondly on it.
Got it. Got it. But like right now, part of this education process for, I think, Americans are to understand that there's Gaza, which is one section. And I use this example, but obviously I know there's not this much geography in between the two, but I try to tell people, think of Gaza as being California, and then think of the West Bank as being as far apart as it can, and it's the East Coast, like New York, Maine, all that. Now, again, there's not obviously remotely that much land between the two,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
you have two sections that are completely separate from each other.
that's
So
exactly right.
everything for the past 20 months has been focused on Gaza. One thing that I just can't wrap my mind around is, where are the leadership of the West Bank? Where is this Mahmoud Abbas guy? Why is he not coming to not even the rescue of Gaza, but at least being vocal? But what you just explained probably is a big part of that answer. he's in bed with the Israelis. He gets his money from the Israelis. And I can't imagine he's very well liked.
He's deeply unpopular. Him and his entire the elite circle that's around him. These are all very wealthy people, very well connected to Israeli military intelligence, as well as the CIA, and as well as Gulf countries too. So this is a very deeply unpopular group of people. And what they've done over the last 20 months has really let down a lot of the Palestinian people. And this is all by design, right? What you described is really well in terms of California versus New York. West Bank and Gaza, there's an intentional separation of them. As long as you can keep them separated and you're not going to allow there to be one entity that represents both, you prevent any sort of idea of a Palestinian state. And it's the same thing that's happening in the West Bank with settlement expansion. If you look at how settlements are expanding, what it does is it cuts off major city and population centers in the West Bank from each other. So Ramallah is in one area in the West Bank, Nablus is in another area, Hebron is in another area, Bethlehem is in another area, totally separated from each other. How can you ever create a state if they're so deeply separated by what's going to approach 1 million settlers? And it's the same idea with Gaza and the West Bank. And so the way that the Israelis have done to really separate any sort of unity is by playing them up against each other. And unfortunately, the leadership under Mahmoud Abbas has been more about self-preservation as opposed to unifying the people and really having the most possible leverage when you're trying to negotiate for a future Palestinian state.
Okay, that makes total sense. Okay, let's get back to the medical situation there, because honestly, man, it just kills me. Like every time I see images, all the stuff Dr. Mimi shared with me, going through that podcast episode with her, the stuff you post, the stuff, Jewish doctors like Dr. Mark Perlmutter. I don't know if you've met Dr. Perlmutter
Of course,
through
absolutely.
this.
Yeah.
I mean, how many hospitals are left in Gaza? Is there one hospital left?
There's probably right now in Gaza 2 hospitals that you would call a hospital that are partially functioning, and there's probably 3 sorts of areas where patients can go to in other parts of Gaza. I mean, it's the situation on the ground is absolutely miserable. And I think the first thing we have to understand is, how did it get this way? And it got this way for 3 reasons. First and foremost, there is a massive military campaign happening by a very sophisticated military that's using fighter jets, specifically F-16s and F-35s, that's using military tanks, and that's using a ground invasion in different parts of Gaza. The Israelis, if you look at satellite imagery that's been published, in fact, a colleague of mine published from October 2023 to November 2023. So, Ray, we're talking about probably 5 weeks of satellite imagery looking at North Gaza. What he found based on analyzing the images is that there was an indiscriminate approach to the way that the Israelis were bombing the area. What they found is that there wasn't any sort of pattern that you're going to avoid and ensure that the protected status of hospitals, shelters, schools would be protected. So that's number one. You need to know that there is a military with a tremendous amount of firepower unleashing hell on Gaza. That's number one. Number two is the fact that the actual healthcare system itself was purposefully dismantled and targeted. And what I mean by that is we can go back to October. We'll go back to October 21st, 2023. And that was the first time a hospital had been hit. It was Al-Ahli Baptist Hospital. It's connected to the Baptist church that's there, ancient church, Palestinian Christians that have been there forever. It was hit with a missile. Joe Biden comes out and says, this is terrible. This looks really horrible. And then the Israelis start sort of this counter narrative and say, well, we actually think it might have been a member of Islamic Jihad who errantly fired. And so it was this huge cloud of smoke over. In fact, the next day, Biden then makes another statement on the White House lawn, and he goes, oh, it turns out it was the other guys. Well, once everybody started investigating it, like forensic architecture, they started analyzing the trajectory of the missile. They started looking at what happened. They realized that this came from Israel. It came from what is now Israeli territory. Who fired it? What happened? Nobody knows, but we know it came from Israel. And so that was the first time a hospital had been attacked, and it was really knocked out of commission for however many days before it could be patched up and lights could be turned back on. And nothing happened. There was no accountability as a result of that. And then what we saw subsequently is hospital after hospital get knocked out, attacked, surrounded, prevented from getting diesel fuel for the generators or medical equipment or people or ambulances being able to access and deliver people. So it started with the Baptist hospital. It went on to Shifa Hospital, where I've worked at many times in the past 15 years. It's the largest medical center. Like, think of any university hospital in the United States.
Yeah.
That's, everybody
Yeah.
goes through there. The medical
Massive,
students are in there.
massive, right?
Massive,
Okay.
absolutely
Okay.
massive.
And,
Shifa.
and let me ask you this: prior to these attacks, was Shifa Hospital? I don't want to say a state of the art hospital. I'm not trying to compare it to like the Cleveland Clinic or something like that. But was it sanitary? Was it clean? Was it functioning? Did it have good equipment, X-ray machines? Like was it a legit hospital?
It was legit. It was phenomenal. I mean, I'm somebody who had worked there, and again, so many organizations would also try to devote resources because it was such a major hub. It was in Gaza
Yeah.
City, and everybody throughout Gaza could access it. And
Yeah.
even there's the Palestinian American Medical Association. They built a state-of-the-art interventional radiology suite, and the reason this is important is because it allows you to do non-invasive procedures for all sorts of problems that people may have, blood clots, or maybe they need to get something, fistula for dialysis. It had been completed August 2023. And so Shifa was this incredible developing hospital, and all of these international organizations would go there. They devote time, resources, anything that would get into Gaza. You try to make sure Shifa was state of the art. And then, like, really close behind that is Nasser Hospital in the south. So Shifa is like in the north, Nasser is in the south. Those are your two main hubs, right? And if you were paying attention, Shifa got attacked, surrounded, destroyed. Then Nasser got attacked, surrounded, and destroyed. Then there's Aqsa in the middle area. There's the European Gaza
So
hospital.
those two are gone. Those two hospitals are gone.
Nasser has been repaired and is functioning right now, partially
Okay.
functioning. Shifa is starting to, there was like these adjacent buildings. They've started to repair that and accept patients and see people there. They have some dialysis machines running there. I mean, this is really a testament to the Palestinian like healthcare workers on the ground. I mean,
Yeah.
what would happen is you would see the Israeli tanks withdraw from the area, and like it's quiet for one night. The very next day, you would see the doctors, the engineers, the nurses back there trying to patch things up and see if they can hook up some sort of electricity to a generator and try to receive patients. I mean, that was literally what you would see take place in Gaza over the last 20 months. And the problem is every time a hospital gets attacked, it's nowhere near what it was before it was attacked. I'm sure you can,
Right. Right.
it's
Right.
you're
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
trying to get the lights on. You're trying to do something. Maybe you can get one operating room working where before you had four. So that's been the story. And that's like, again, so like first part of this, military's attacking everywhere. Second part, hospitals seem to have a specific targeting of it and healthcare workers. And then the last part of it is the suffocating blockade and siege. The World Health Organization is not able to bring in vaccines if there's a polio outbreak. They're not able to bring in IV fluids. You're not able to bring in medical equipment. You're seeing people on the ground in Gaza. Right when I was there, we're using stuff that should be one-time use. We're using it
Yeah.
multiple times. We're not able to sterilize as well as we'd like. We don't have hospital beds. And that was all of these three things just create this massive nightmare that we're seeing play out right now. Like last week or a week and a half ago, we're saying, hey, we've got premature babies at Nasser Hospital. We've got
Yeah.
6 of them that are critically ill and they need special formula. No formula has entered since March 2nd, 2025. Please, can we bring in a truck of formula for these babies? And the director of that, Ahmad Al-Farra, has gone on Western media, The Guardian. He's talked to people in the United States. He's saying, please, we need formula for these babies. I'm starting to ration it. I'm starting to decrease the amount I'm giving each baby. They're starting to breathe faster. Their heads are starting to have sunken where the area, like the soft spot in their head, it's sunken because they're dehydrated. They're crying weakly because they're not able to like really have the energy to cry like they normally would. And he's begging people. And there's maybe a small amount of supplies that enters. And then the following week, because of the conditions I just described, now there's a meningitis outbreak. We have more
Oh,
than 300. So it's like one emergency after the other because of those three things that just were unleashed on Gaza.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's a slow suffocation. I mean, it really is. Like, I don't understand when it comes to sanitary conditions, like sepsis has to be rampant. Like, I have to imagine people are just dying from infections that they're getting while they're in the hospital getting care. Hell, that happens in the United States. I think 1,000 people every year die from sepsis inside US hospitals, which supposedly, are, well, I don't know if I'd say the gold standard, but they're supposed to be the gold standard. So I can't even imagine the sanitary conditions of these hospitals or hospital, being that we're down to one or two in Gaza. It's just got to be awful.
You bring up such an important point because the death toll that we are seeing that's emerging from Gaza, that's reported by the health ministry, right? We're at somewhere in the 60,000. But that's all direct, what we would call direct
Yeah.
from war, right? These are people who are dying in airstrikes. These are people who are dying from bullet wounds. We're not talking about the indirect deaths that we know are very high because of what you just described. Almost everybody who had some sort of wound as a result of a bombing and they survived it, that wound got infected. And if
Yeah.
you're also starving a population, they're not going to have the immune system to be able to fight off the infection, to be able to handle the next infection that they get. We're not able to talk about the elderly people who have heart disease that would be easily managed with medications if they were entering, or diabetes. All of these people are suffering. You're talking about 20 months. And once the dust settles and we get access like we used to get access, this number is going to be horrifying. The number of people who have died as a result of this 20 months, 21 months, it's going to be astronomically high. And I think every public health official in the world recognizes that. This is not a disputed sort of claim. It's understanding what the conditions are on the ground, realizing our inability to access
Right.
appropriately, and then having
Right.
to realize so many people have perished unnecessarily.
Let alone, I mean, the rubble that I witness when I see these videos. I'm like, there has to be thousands of bodies underneath this rubble. There just absolutely has to be. It's just horrifying. I don't even know how the people do it, man. I really don't. It is obviously a testament to the will of the Palestinian people, but I just don't even know. And as a medical worker, I remember talking to Dr. Mimi about this. I was like, how do you even how do you even handle this? Like, she sent me some images. I haven't shared them anywhere. I mean, it's horrifying. It's just horrifying. There was one image she sent me and I texted her back. I said, I don't even understand what I'm looking at. What am I looking at? And she said, that's a human body. And I'm not kidding. I mean, I'm glad and I'm not glad I looked at it, because obviously I can't get it out of my mind, but I'm glad I looked at it because it really drove home the point to me that people have no idea what the real truth is over there, and it's a million times worse as what we're seeing scroll on our phone, which is already awful if you're paying attention.
I mean,
Insane.
I'll tell you what, it is truly, truly miserable thinking about some of the things that are taking place on the ground. And it's far beyond just sort of like the injuries that you'll see in a bombing, or, what happens when somebody's pulled from the rubble. It's also sort of how people have had to continuously pick up and leave and be displaced somewhere. And you see these
Yeah,
kids and
yeah.
these families, and their life has just been totally altered, and you see kids waiting in line. There's like a truck that has a tank of water, and you see like this line of 100 people, and then you see like 30 of them, many of them kids, with their empty canisters, and the truck has ran out of water. And just watching them have to turn around and go back to their tent, empty canister, it's just this deep pain that you're feeling. This is a crazy, like, the numbers that we're hearing out of Gaza are really insane. I don't know how we're able to really sort of grasp it, but in the last 3 months, they're saying that 700,000 people in Gaza have had to literally leave where they were and go find somewhere else to live with their family, like find some other area that they can try to pitch a makeshift tent. And you're just thinking about all of these people who have been affected by what's happening here. The kids who've been out of school for 20 months, the fact that all the universities have been bombed out, that there's no chance that they'll be able to. Nobody's been exposed to certain food groups for the last, 10 months or
Yeah.
11 months. And you're like, every single aspect of life has been under attack. Like literally every single aspect of life has been altered. There's nothing that you can think about right now here in the United States that you're doing in 24 hours that has not been interrupted in Gaza in a deliberate way. Whether it's, scrolling on your phone, being able to be connected to internet, having access to charge your phone or to charge your laptop, being able to go to school or to go to work, being able to get a cab or an Uber because there's no fuel that's entering, being able to have chicken at night because there's no protein that's entering the market. If you're lucky, you'll be able to get a piece of bread or a can of beans. I mean, that's just,
Yeah.
and I haven't even talked about the fighter jets. I mean, one of my colleagues was telling me this, and this is something that, again, it's like a small thing that doesn't come to the forefront when you think about everything that's happening. But he's like, my mom is 65 years old and she's in a tent in the middle of Gaza. And the closest outhouse where she can go use the bathroom is a 15-minute walk. And he's like, she's got a bad leg. She's got arthritis. I mean, just that process, like just to
That's
use the
insane.
bathroom,
That's
it's just,
insane. That is insane. Oh my God, that is insane. The entire infrastructure is gone. And I think that was absolutely on purpose. Absolutely on purpose. I don't even know what's next for Gaza. Like the rebuilding process, just the clean out process from that. I mean, this will take a decade,
yeah.
maybe longer.
I mean, that's what the UN is saying. The UN development program is saying if we are to have all of the materials that we need, all of the heavy machinery to remove the rubble, just removing the
Yeah.
rubble is going
Yeah.
to take 8 years. And
8 years to
and they made
remove the rubble.
and they made assumptions that the day after would not have some sort of blockade in place, would not have some sort of restrictions. Their assumption is we're loading hundreds of trucks every day with rubble and we're getting them out of Gaza. That alone will take 8 years. And we're, again, like think about water infrastructure, sewage. I mean, these things are devastating. I mean, if you go in the summertime, if there's a little bit of rain, just the sewage is in the streets, which is a public health nightmare, but it's also
The sewage has gotta be everywhere. How is there any clean running water, or is all water, bottled water, jugs water? How is the
This is
water
the other
working?
thing. There is 3 major water pipelines that enter Gaza that come from Israel. And on October 8th, 2023, all of them were shut off. And since that's happened, they've turned on some occasionally and turned off. Like anytime they're going to be active in an area, they'll turn off the water supply there. So it's very inconsistent when the water gets there. The other thing is there were power plants. There was 2 they were basically for water sanitation and filtration. And immediately in October 2023, one of them suffered damage. The other one ran out of fuel and stopped functioning. And again, you get intermittent times where they'll be able to work. So what people
Yeah,
have done so they can reliably access water is they've started to just trying to dig wells. And the problem is that that water is not fit for human consumption in Gaza. It's been
right,
studied
right.
extensively. And sometimes it mixes with the seawater. The Mediterranean Sea is there. So it's just not fit for human consumption. And so we're stuck with a really miserable situation where people are drinking bad water and their access to water is not consistent or reliable. Now, to me, again, Oxfam talked about this before October 2023, by the way. They have a phenomenal report talking about how water was being used as a way to occupy the people of Gaza, the way that water is being given to them, it's being controlled by the Israelis. And, like if you look at all of the different reputable humanitarian organizations and human rights organizations prior to October 7th, you're going to see some disturbing reports that have come out. And I'll just mention one briefly. It's from Save the Children.
And
It
you're
was
saying prior to October 7th. So
prior.
this is all prior to all this.
Right.
Okay.
It's why all of them are pulling their hair out. It's why all of these groups that you see, Oxfam, today, Doctors Without Borders, MSF, called it a genocide in one of their releases, which is a huge, it's a very important step. It's something that these organizations, they don't like to really kind of put on an advocacy hat if they don't have to. But they don't want to be sitting there and saying oh, don't do this is wrong. They want to be active. They want to be doing operations.
Right.
They've been prevented from doing so. And the reason that they are so loud about Gaza is because they were there before October 7th. And Save the Children, for example, again, a UK huge organization. Everybody respects it. Nobody has anything bad to say about Save the Children. Save the Children said before October 7th, 2023, that nearly 2/3 of kids in Gaza were engaging in self-harm behaviors. They were talking about a huge number of kids were having suicidal thoughts. A huge number of
My
kids
God.
were bedwetting. And it's telling you that these kids have had to survive through all of these different military operations. Well, what do we think is happening to the kids now? I mean, this is something that nobody has ever seen happen in Gaza, the way that they've had to endure for 20 months, the stuff that's happened to them. What do we think is going to happen to this entire generation? And so, you bring up a couple of really important points here. It's like physical infrastructure gone, the ability to just have access to water devastated, the chance for people to go to hospitals to get the healing and the treatment that they need out of question unless you're somehow involved in an airstrike. Well, what do we expect to happen? I mean, what do we expect to happen
Yeah.
to this entire group of people? And you come to a conclusion that number one, that if we're to look at this as some sort of policy, it's clear that the policy is that nobody should be able to survive in Gaza, and that the only thing that they can do to survive is to somehow leave. That they should have to leave the
Yeah.
Gaza Strip.
Yeah.
You know, and to me, like that's I don't know. I mean, if you just to look at it from a lens of a humanitarian, you're thinking about, wow, everything has been devastated, everything has been destroyed. Where do I even
No,
start? I don't know where to start.
absolutely. I don't even know. I don't know where you start. Like when I look at the situation and I hear whether it's Trump or whoever saying everybody needs to leave Gaza, obviously your initial reaction is what gives you the right to do that? But then if you step above and be like, oh my God, like, how do you stay? I don't understand how you stay. There's no infrastructure anymore. And building infrastructure is not six dudes trying to, tap into water in the ground. Like it's just impossible. It's absolutely impossible. And these kids, let me ask you this. I see so much about amputation with children. Like it seems like half the kids there are now amputated.
Yeah, I mean that it's Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta, who is a pretty famous UK plastic surgeon, was saying early in 2023, I should say late 2023 and early 2024, he was saying this is the largest cohort of child amputees in the
Oh,
history, since especially since World War II. And he's somebody who's worked in Lebanon, he worked in Beirut, in the and to me it's there's a couple of things about people who suffer traumatic amputations is from a perspective of like, okay, how do we recover, how do we get them on track? And all of that is not possible in Gaza. First and foremost, you want to make sure they can survive the injury and that you can have proper wound care. So as the
yeah,
wound is
yeah,
healing,
yeah,
you make sure it doesn't get infected, and we already talked about how that's just really not possible in Gaza. The second part is the rehab, is how
yeah.
do I make sure somebody who lost a limb at 6 years old or at 9, how do I get them back to a functional level where they're able to move around, where they can have some degree of independence? And Ray, that's so important, not just from them being able to care for themselves. It's very important from a mental health perspective. It's been studied very well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
If you can, for these kids who suffer these amputations, if you can get them to do their own dressings, their wound dressings,
Yeah.
they have better outcomes in terms of like that depression and the post-traumatic stress afterwards, right? Because you're empowering them, you're allowing them to be independent. Well, in Gaza, we can't even get them crutches or wheelchairs. We can't even guarantee that they can go and use the bathroom, let alone be able to have privacy and be able to do it safely by themselves. And so that also is out of the question. And then the last part of this is some of these amputations could maybe benefit from prosthetics, but the
Yes.
prosthetics, because they have metal in them, are prohibited by the Israelis from entering in any sort of quantity. And the reason for that, they call it dual use. They call these items dual use items because they feel that a prosthetic leg, because it has metal in it, could be taken by some group in Gaza and manipulated in a way and used as a weapon.
As a weapon.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I know, dude. It's insane. It's just insane. And it's like you look at these videos. I mean, the worst part about looking at these videos is when I see the kid smiling and laughing and he has no arms and no legs. And in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, this child is so incredible to be able to even laugh when he has no arms and no legs. Meanwhile, I cut my finger the other day and I thought my life was going to end. Like I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I cut my finger.
There was a
Oh
kid.
my God.
There was a kid that Al Jazeera Arabi was able to record who had basically lost part of their hand and was a double amputee below the knee, and was able to use the other hand and was able to use where the stump is and put it in a rollerblade, and was moving through the tents with the rollerblade crawling on the ground. And he's smiling and laughing and stuff, and you're like, you just want to give those kids a chance. You just want, and I know that nobody disagrees with that. Nobody will look at an image of multiple kids in incubators who are just kind of like staring up, hungry, don't know, they don't know what's going on, what world they've been born into. They don't realize they're tanks outside of the hospital. You're like, man, is it really so controversial to be able to bring them formula for the day or for the month? I
Yeah,
don't think
yeah,
anybody would
yeah.
disagree with that. Regardless of what you think about Gaza, Palestine, Israel, when it comes down to the kids or to the pregnant mothers or to the
Yes,
breastfeeding mothers,
yes, yes.
we're all in agreement about what needs to happen. I think, part of this also with what's happening in Gaza, for us to change the situation on the ground, is we need to be able to show that that's the reality, to show like moms who are distressed because they've got a 2 month in a tent and they're not able to produce enough milk to breastfeed them because they're hungry and they've not had the nutrition that they need. Like, I think it doesn't matter what language she's speaking. I think everybody will look at that
I
and just
mean,
be,
it shouldn't matter. Unfortunately, I still think it does. And the thing I always go back to when I encounter somebody that just doesn't get it, I go to the kids. I show them images of kids. I'm like, okay, you know what? If you want to have a grudge against adults, that's fine. I don't agree with it, but I'll let that slide. But I can't let this slide. Like, how can you let this slide? It's no different than right now with, all of a sudden there's no Epstein list. And it's like, wait a minute, this guy was part of a pedophile ring where they sexually molested children. If you want to forget the adult on adult stuff, you shouldn't, but whatever, but not kids. Like,
no, because of justice.
how can you let anything that affects innocent children slide? It's just insane.
Not to get
My God.
sorry, not to get
No, God, yeah, keep going,
uh,
man.
it just you're right. You reminded me of the floods that are happening in Texas. And I think all of us sat there thinking about the families who maybe sent their daughters to the summer camp and
Yeah,
their daughters are not coming home, and I think it really just it gets at you. And I remember looking at Cruz recently, kind of video talking about it, and there's just clearly from Ted Cruz, there's just clearly the guy doesn't have the empathy gene. He just doesn't, it's
no,
just not
no.
registering to him. And you're like, well, I just feel like everyday Americans, every single one of us heard that story, and you're just miserable as a result of it. Like, it
You're
breaks you.
miserable. You're absolutely miserable. You see an American family who lost a 13-year-old girl to floods. You're miserable. Like that should shake you to your core. And
100%.
so should seeing what's going on with these kids in Gaza. This should absolutely shake you to your core.
Yeah. And I
Uh,
think that's the point for me, is like, I think if people saw, for example, that kid rolling around, using the rollerblade to get around after he's lost so many limbs, or if you look at some of the kids now who are on the beach, just running up and down the beach in Gaza, not realizing that there's an Israeli
yeah.
warship so far away, and they're just trying, they're just kids. Kids are kids, at the end
They're
of the
just
day.
kids. They're just kids trying to be kids. All right, let me ask you this. In terms of the West Bank, because obviously I know you were supposed to spend
Yeah.
time in Jerusalem before
Yeah.
you got a WhatsApp message telling you you can't go, which is just still mind-boggling to me. What's it like in the West Bank right now? I know these settlements are popping up and all that, but is it chaotic? Is it scary? What's going
Yeah.
on in the West Bank right now?
So I think this is a problem even within the Israeli government, the current far right wing government, that they're concerned about. You have extremist settlers in the West Bank that are terrorizing different Palestinian villages. And we're talking about people dying. I mean, you're literally seeing these settlers encroach on areas, villages like Tormasaya, which has a huge Palestinian American population there, and just burning cars, fighting people, destroying crops. And you're seeing that pop up all around the West Bank, so much so that these settlers have gotten so extreme that they have even ambushed Israeli soldiers who are trying to do crowd control. And this is a major problem. This happened last week. It is a major problem for the Israelis right now, and they understand that. But on the other part, the violence is getting more and more aggressive. I mean, I'm sure everybody heard this, but when that Oscar documentary won about the village near Hebron in the West Bank
Yeah.
called Masraf, and it's about how basically that town is being ethnically cleansed and being occupied by settlers. But when one of the producers or the director went back home to the West Bank, he was attacked by a bunch of Israeli settlers, beaten, and guess what? He got arrested by the Israeli military afterwards. He was arrested for 1 day, put in jail, of course, released because he didn't do anything wrong, and had to go to the hospital after he spent a night in Israeli prison. And so the conditions in the West Bank it's miserable right now. There are more than 1,000 checkpoints. And these checkpoints, what they do is, it's not like car comes through, you give your ID card to an Israeli soldier.
Yeah.
They decide that nobody's getting out of this town tonight. They put a checkpoint in, Israeli soldiers show up, maybe they'll let a few cars pass through, but otherwise it's total lockdown. So I have family members who crossed into Jericho, where the border between the West Bank and Jordan is, and they got stuck in Jericho for 2 nights because the Israelis set up a checkpoint and decided to put the whole city on lockdown. And you're seeing it happen all throughout the West Bank. And I guess the other part of this that might be important to mention is since October 7th, the ability for Palestinians to go and work in Jerusalem or in other parts of Israel, their ability to get those sort of permits to go and work has basically been eliminated, gone. Especially there's been a dependence in Israel on trying to get foreign workers from other parts of the world, India, Sri Lanka, wherever, anybody that'll come that's not Palestinian. And so the economy is totally devastated as well. And it's tough right now. And I think hopefully we hear about a ceasefire within the next week in Gaza, but I think people will start to realize just how tough things are in the West Bank and how essentially evaporating before our very eyes. I mean, the West Bank is a strong focus, especially for far right Israelis.
Absolutely. I think that's the crown jewel. I think the West Bank is the crown jewel. This is what they're after the entire time. And Gaza has been, in some ways, I don't know, a distraction while they maybe do whatever they're doing there, increasing the settlements, increasing the violence, all under the radar because the entire radar is focused on Gaza because it's just cataclysmic what's happening.
Yeah, that's
Man, dude, it's just mind.
the thing you have to. I think the other thing you have to understand about Netanyahu in general is he is a very different kind of politician. And he's one that really runs circles around American politicians. And he's a maximalist. And so when you talk about, what's happening in Gaza, he's not going to let the opportunity to accomplish whatever goals he has in the West Bank go to waste because he knows everybody's focusing on hey, there's a crisis right now, a famine in Gaza. He's not going to let that opportunity go to waste. He's an opportunist. He's been in the game for over 30 years. Guys like Pete Hegseth or, some of these like first timers in these positions, Witkoff, for example, who doesn't have a lot of experience.
Yeah.
Netanyahu is going to run circles around them. And so that's,
the guy is, I've said this on my podcast many times, I have 0% respect for him as a human being. But as a politician, the dude is excellent. He really is. Unfortunately, I hate even giving him that compliment, but I have to give him that compliment because if I was on his team, that's the guy I'd want in charge. And he's been in charge for the better part of 30 years, 35 years. And he knows that if this war ends, and if war ends in general, he's going to jail. He's going to The Hague. I mean, probably not even that, but he should be. But, for him, everything not being okay is job security. It really is. It's job security for him.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why you're starting to hear, for example, the president Trump right now saying things like, oh, the corruption trial in Israel against Benjamin Netanyahu is a hoax and it's delaying peace. It's because he's telling them that, hey, okay, you guys want me to end this war in Gaza, well, these are the things that I need. And so there's a reason we saw Trump come out and say, drop the
Yeah.
corruption charges against him. There's a reason Secretary Rubio sanctioned the UN Special Rapporteur that found that they had committed international humanitarian law violations. There's a reason that they're starting now to say what's happening to Netanyahu at the ICC is inappropriate and we're going to sanction the ICC. So he's, I mean, again, like he's the one who's sort of saying, all right, well, I'm going to use me ending our activity in Gaza as a way to personally survive all of this and remain in power. And I mean, I think the Americans at this point were like, we want to be done with this headache. We want to be done with the fact that, you're dragging us into all of these different situations in the Middle East. Fine, whatever. Like he knows that, I'll say one thing that I found very interesting, just because we're sitting there as humanitarian organizations saying, please help us get this stuff in. Please let us do this. And, with respect to Witkoff, who's trying to sort of get these negotiations, trying to get a ceasefire, there's a report that came out that Netanyahu's right-hand man, Ron Dermer, after Witkoff had made some gains with Hamas about a ceasefire deal, flew to Rome because Witkoff was in Rome for Iran negotiations before the 12-day war, and he was yelling at him at the top of his lungs. I mean, this is the United States special envoy, and the assistant or the advisor of Netanyahu is wiping the floor with him, yelling at him. And that's just sort of the relationship kind of that you're seeing playing out. And that's what's getting in the way of us being able to get people out of Gaza who need medical treatment, to get stuff in. It's become this political game while all of these people on the ground are suffering immensely.
Makes you wonder who's really in charge, right?
Yeah, I tell you, it's just, especially when it's the will of the people, it seems like there's a popular mandate for America, for example, not to be dragged into endless wars or regime change,
Well, I will tell you though, man, it's definitely caused an awakening among Americans. You go on to even the 2 days ago or a few days ago when Netanyahu came to the White House for what feels like the 27th time in the past month. The images that get posted on Instagram, you read those comments and they are not positive. They are not positive. They are 99% negative. People are like, what is this guy doing here again? This isn't the United States of Israel. Get rid of this guy. And this is coming from like what looks like MAGA. It looks like people in MAGA, white Americans who are absolutely going crazy on him. And that's what we kind of need. All right, listen, I know you're pressed. By the way, I have to tell you something. You are a medical doctor with the savviness of a geopolitical analyst, man. I love it. I love it. You might, if you don't want to be a doctor anymore, I think you could go on Pierce Morgan and Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and the Deep Shallow Dive as a political geo-analyst.
No, I appreciate that, man. I prefer my day job, but
there you
go. When you're a Palestinian, though, it's crazy because this is kind of the environment that you're growing up in. You're glued to what's happening. You're trying to figure out what the next steps are.
Feel you. All right, listen, last thing. I mean, where do you think this goes from here? What do you think happens over the next, let's say even 6 months, is this going to come to an end, or is it going to end in Gaza and start up in the West Bank? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're going to see, hopefully, is we'll see a ceasefire agreement take place within the next week or so. It'll be a 60-day agreement. You will see two things. I think one of the major things that'll happen that's a good thing is this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, this Israeli-American aid mechanism that's happening where people are showing up trying to get food boxes and instead being met with bullets. I think you'll see that be minimized. It won't go away. It's not, but what you'll see is that UN kind of traditional route will bring aid in as well over the next 60 days. I think we will see some people get medically evacuated out of Gaza. What a big question mark is, that's going to be like something that everybody's paying attention to, is whether or not the Israelis decide to withdraw from an axis that cuts off Rafah, the border town between Egypt and Gaza Strip, or they will remain and have a presence there. If that's the case, that means that site where there's that border crossing is suddenly disconnected from the rest of Gaza. And that is very problematic in any sort of recovery or reconstruction. So I think that's what we'll probably see. Whether or not that results in a permanent ceasefire actually depends on the political climate in Israel.
Yeah.
That's what matters. The West Bank, the status quo is not going to change. We're not going to see any sort of calmness resume in the West Bank. I think there is a new leader that has been announced who's going to succeed Mahmoud Abbas.
Was that right? I didn't even hear that.
Yeah, his name is Hussein al-Sheikh. Abbas, his right-hand man, very close with the Americans, very close with the Israelis, strong connections there, wealthy person. You're not going to see a change in Palestinian leadership. You're not going to see a change in kind of anything that happens in the West Bank. So I think any talks, because you hear European countries, you hear Macron, you're hearing everybody coming out saying we're going to recognize Palestine as a state. The problem with that is the reality on the ground is not going to change whatsoever. And so,
Yeah.
maybe you get this, maybe you get these countries that are recognizing it. It's all symbolic in nature, which is important. But again, the reality on the ground is something to keep in mind. And then ultimately, I think one thing that to keep in mind is, what does Gaza look like in terms of leadership? Is it going to be the Palestinian Authority, or is it going to be some group? Hamas is saying in their ceasefire agreement they would like a technocratic government, apolitical experts in different fields form a government. The Palestinian Authority is pitching themselves saying we can come back and we can govern Gaza. And then the third aspect of this, what the Israelis would prefer, is a coalition from some of the Gulf states and Arab states that have normalized relations already with the Israelis. They would like to have some sort of coalition that's sponsored by them. And then that way, for them, that would be the best case scenario. Who knows? I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, to be honest with you, because I think Arab coalition would not be welcomed by the Palestinians in Gaza. They'd be very, suspect of that. I don't know if the Palestinian Authority would be able to handle coming back to the Gaza Strip if the Israelis are not going to give them the money to do so, if they're not going to get sort of the tax or the aid. So it all depends. I think those things are up in the air. But for me, the entire Middle East looks very different than before October 7th. And there's so many question marks, right? Like, is Syria going to normalize relations with the Israelis? What's going to happen in southern Lebanon? Are the Israelis going to withdraw from there? What does any of this, what's the deal with Iran? Are we going to get a deal between the United States and Iran?
Yeah.
It's so many question marks.
There's a lot of moving parts. I think Syria will absolutely normalize with Israel. And I think that whole Al-Jilani or whatever his name is now, I mean, that's all such, I call him Zelensky 2.0. I mean, I think that's all just such propaganda. Iran's going to be a wild card. I mean, Iran's going to be a wild card. I don't know what's going to happen there, because in my mind, I'm like, if push comes to shove, will Russia and China, North Korea to an extent, but really Russia and China, and really China, like, will they step up if the United States tries to take Iran and put Iran on their side of the ledger? That's going to be where the rubber meets the road. Anyway, listen, man, I really appreciate your time, and this has been incredibly informative from a medical and geopolitical standpoints. Thanks again for that. Listen, I'd love to have you back on, because
anytime.
I didn't realize I can tap into that geopolitical mind as much as that exists. I thought this was going to be a purely medical thing, but seriously, I'd love to do another one where, maybe I'm sure I'll get a bunch of questions from the audience. Maybe we can take those questions and use those as a base and all that. Anyway, I just wish you and your family the best. And, just know there's a lot of people that truly understand, and they truly are, they're cognizant of what the truth is. I mean, there's really no other way to put it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I really appreciate it. Anytime. I'm happy to talk about this. And again, I think at the end of the day, I just want more conversations about this. I want people to have a better idea of what's happening, because I don't think they're getting it from the mainstream media, and
No, of course they're not. They're absolutely not. All right, listen, hang on the line. All right, everybody, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Remember to call a spade, and we will talk to you soon. All right.
This episode was brought to you by Zippix nicotine toothpicks. Zip more, smoke less. Totally satisfying, discreet, and delicious. Zippix nicotine-infused toothpicks are available in 6 great flavors, each containing at least 2 milligrams of nicotine to curb those cravings. Zippix is FDA registered and proudly made in the USA. Use discount code DSD for 10% off your order at zippixtoothpicks.com. Zip more, smoke less, save 10%.